Well, it's Halloween time, and that means we have to deal with our deepest fears as the people around us attempt to scare us. Also, we can dress up as whatever on the final night. And since I should be doing something of horror for this month, I am here to do another review of a favorite show of mine, but it's scarier episodes. That being Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Now, before I review it, I do have to open up with something first. I have avoided one of these episodes for a long time, because the promo terrified me as a kid. I will show it when it's relevant, but just know that this will be the first time I properly watch it, because a while back I did catch, the ending of it, and maybe the episode itself, but I might have just forgotten. However, there's still more I should go over, believe it or not. See, these two episodes are the tail end of an already going story, that being the return to Geonosis. See, after the Jedi got a lead on another droid factory on Geonosis, they decided to invade it, just like Episode 2.
Machines making machines? How perverse.
You said it, 3PO. But yeah, the invasion comes down to the Padawans of Anakin and Luminara to sneak into the factory, while the Masters deal with a bigger threat, leading to a moment where Ahsoka and Barris get caught in the crossfire of the mission, and genuinely almost die due to oxygen deprivation. But it ends on a successful mission, and them alive. The only thing needed to wrap it all up is to hunt down a separatist leader known as Poggle the Lesser. So, let's get into it. Ahsoka and Barris are being withdrawn from the Geonosis campaign, while the Masters stay behind to finish the mission. Luminara and a clone get a fresh lead on Poggles, it being an ammo crate, and suspect that he is fleeing into an old temple that, to the Republic's knowledge, doesn't have many advantages to it. In spite of the sandstorm, both sides press onward, with success. We get some weird imagery inside the temple's entrance, including a strange grate that dives further underground into a catacomb system. But before Luminara and a clone can pull back, she's attacked and communication is lost, leaving Obi-Wan and Anakin to wait out the sandstorm before they can help. Unfortunately, the clone with her didn't make it, and Luminara is now without her lightsaber. A strange action given the Geonosians and battle droids know how valuable such an item is. So, the group moves forward into the catacombs. On the flip side, we see Luminara being carried off by strange-looking Geonosians that have very slow and disjointed movements, and also don't really have pain receptors, as Luminara gut punches one and breaks through their skin, but she's also recaptured after sending a warning. That's when we get to the real danger, as the group finds themselves surrounded by Geonosian zombies. That's right, Star Wars is doing zombies. Conventional fighting from the clones proves difficult, so they have to improvise. Two clones are also tasked with heading back to the surface to send out a message, but of course they get overwhelmed very quickly and perish. Realizing it's fruitless to try and go back and further divide themselves, they are forced to resolve this issue as quickly as possible. All the while, danger ramps up for Luminara as xenomorph-style eggs are being produced, and we get a short glimpse of the fabled Geonosian Queen. Through sheer luck, they stumble across Luminara, and Anakin comes up with a genius plan of him taking on the Queen while everyone else is just backup. However, Obi-Wan wants to learn more about the lore, while Anakin wants to rush in, but is forced to agree to a more tactical approach. Thankfully as well, the Queen speaks English, and gets into a little conversation with Obi-Wan, which isn't a good conversation, but we do learn more about the Queen's plans, to infect the Jedi with her little hive mind worms, and then spread across the galaxy that way.
Great. Find out everything you wanted to know yet?
No, wait. I want to see how it works.
I don't think Luminara wants to see how it works.
No, I don't.
As funny as this banter is between all three Jedi, I want to pull up another clip.
We don't have time to double back to the surface. Every moment we waste puts Luminara in greater danger.
Even if this conversation is currently stalled, and it is all part of some scheme, it still feels really weird that Obi-Wan is risking Luminara's freedom this much. If the worm had entered through the ear, this would be a failed mission, and probably put the Republic in a very much worse position. Though Obi-Wan, the wise master as he is, does take the worm to further study it, however, Anakin misreads it and stomps it to death. Thankfully.
What are you doing? I was going to study that! Study the bottom of my boot. Come on, let's get out of here!
Okay, that was a good line. You gotta agree with that one. In order to escape, they have to knock out the supports to the temple and have it all collapse on top of the Queen and these undead nightmares. So, with some casualties, the rescue mission is a success, and the secret of how the worms work is lost information. How does this first half hold up? It's pretty good still. Not amazing, as the descent happens rather quickly, and the setup took longer than it probably should have, but everything else really shines. The conversations between the Jedi is really well done, and it gives each of them all individual personalities. And Anakin is written like Anakin is supposed to be, but Obi-Wan is a little questionable with his risking Luminara's safety towards the tail end, after previously worrying about how they used their time. This was also around the time of the explosion of zombies media, thanks Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies and Left 4 Dead for that, but it's glad to see they have a somewhat unique take to it. Instead of it being bites or scratches, it's weird brainworms that act as a hive mind with a queen. Plus, they really captured the feeling of zombies in this episode. Not only do they shamble, have very limited brain activity, but they can also take blaster shots like they're nothing, and swarm any creature they can get their hands on. To carry on with the looks, the setting was amazing. The catacombs are really depicted as claustrophobic and dark, with the swarms only making that space much tighter. Also, the scene with the two clones being sent out on their own was good to set up just how dangerous the situation is, and to show that retreating really isn't an option. And the lighting of where the Queen is really highlights her importance and forces anyone walking in to at least acknowledge her presence. How she knows about the Jedi, I don't know, but that's fine to overlook. Maybe Poggles told her. The plot is also mostly logical. The objective is to get Poggles, so Luminara would chase after him. The sandstorm would be dangerous to drive back in, so pressing forward is the better option, and also makes sense as a reason for why the Jedi won't immediately rush into her location. Sending back two clones in a hostile area definitely isn't the smartest idea, but it makes sense when their numbers are quite low and they need to get a message back for reinforcements as soon as possible. And yes, even Obi-Wan's weird bet with Anakin about how the worm will enter is logical in this plot, because he is as focused on gathering intel about something unknown as he is about saving Luminara. It just all makes sense. I really do miss storytelling like this in Star Wars. Even if this wasn't a part 1 of 2 episode couple, it's still pretty solid as a standalone episode. So on its own, I give it an 8 out of 10. Before we move to the second part, it's time. Time to go over my backstory. As said, the main reason I skipped an episode and only barely watched a couple clips later in life is because of the promotional commercial for it.
Cargo ship TB-73, this is Clone Captain Rex. Please respond.
What is that? Looks like some type of parasite.
If you find a worm in space, do not put it in your nose.
What's happening?
Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
They really played up the horror in these not even 30 seconds of promotional material, and as a kid, that was terrifying. Rewatching it today, I've kinda gotten over it, so maybe I'll be fine watching this episode fully, but even thinking about rewatching it has me nervous. After a recap of Desert Storm, the sabotage of Geonosian droid plants, and recapturing of the planet plus spin-off zombie episode, the Jedi have an unfortunate side mission because Windu needs medical supplies on another battlefield, so the Padawans are tasked with such a mission, while the interrogation of the key prisoners up to the Masters. So, that's why this episode's danger is targeting the Padawan. I said it last time and I'll say it again, there is some logic to this plot. Even though everything happens because of plot contrivances, the writers make sure it feels realistic to separate the group and not something out of left field. Meanwhile, outside the temple, a couple clones are resting, and we see an egg that somehow survived hatch, and the worm starts to crawl on one of the clones and into his nose. My reaction? No. 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 To wake up the clones, their captain shoots off a shot, which is very dangerous around soldiers, and all are informed around their mission to do a supply run, giving us a little personality from one clone who is more of a fighter than an errand boy, until is quickly reminded that they were bred to follow orders. The infected clone has to be woken up though, and it's really creepy how he gets up. More like a puppet on strings than a person. Also somehow, the clone got more eggs? How many survived? What is this, Order 66 and all the Jedi of modern Star Wars? Ahsoka and Barriss have trouble sleeping, with Ahsoka being uncomfortable in the silence and Barriss being annoyed by Ahsoka's uncomfort. As they leave, the infected clone goes about his plans and starts to infect others by tossing the worms nearby the beds. Barriss and Ahsoka have a chat about what it means to be a Jedi and whether they are warriors or protectors. And because this is Clone Wars and canonically before Episode 3, we get some more Anakin being evil teasing.
Anakin? Oh, you might find some of his thoughts on the future, a bit radical.
Really? Why?
Let's just say my master will always do what needs to be done.
It's also minor foreshadowing for later, but before that, the pilots get straight up murdered, and then the two infected clones go to attack Ahsoka and Barriss before getting knocked down. Two more clones enter, and the Padawans hold them at lightsaber point to ask them questions. In order to gain their trust, the pair of clones lay down their arms, and we get a little reference to a previous Season 1 episode, great episode by the way, where another clone betrayed the Republic. It's good that they would think of such a scenario, because it shows that they pay attention to the events around them in this major war. Ahsoka and Barriss head for the bridge, while one clone stays behind, and we then move over to the Masters. Anakin immediately jumps on the danger, and has Rex on standby for any Ahsoka calls, as he is told to relax a little by the other Masters. After all, Anakin's influence on Ahsoka could be a play-in here, with her not checking in given how Anakin usually does things solo, and checks in after, but also that they have a bigger priority of interrogating a prisoner. Security shields are then raised, and one of the friendly clones turns out to actually have been infected, and is quickly killed alongside the worm. Barriss and Ahsoka come up with a plan of their own to warn Kit Fisto, and try to quarantine the influence of these worms until they walk up on an infection party happening in the storage bay. Which I will not show, because I still get rather weird watching it. Unfortunately, the Padawans have been spotted and now have to fight their way out. Because of this little kink in their plan, Barriss comes up with a new one. She will go alone to the engines and shut them down, while Ahsoka sends out a warning call to Kit Fisto to make sure more infections can't happen and ensure that allies outside know of this danger. And also, staying together only risks more danger, so splitting up for once is actually the good call. Ahsoka, very easily I might say, gets a message out to Fisto, who will have precautions in place in order to analyze the worms afterwards. Barriss, unfortunately, walks into an electric trap set up by the infected clones, and becomes infected herself.
If there's one thing we clones know, it's how to stop a Jedi.
Yeah, you proved that with Order 66. I'm sorry, that was too easy, wasn't it? Ahsoka is able to reach Rex and Anakin, and infected Barriss finds Ahsoka afterwards, through the Force, I'd assume, and initiates combat. Won't be the last time she does something like this either. So yeah, now Ahsoka is all alone on a ship with like 20 infected people, and a Jedi being infected among them. So, Anakin begins his interrogation. Rather than using mind tricks, he just smacks him across the face and begins to choke Poggles. Thankfully, nobody is able to see this, otherwise his turn to evil would have been even more obvious. Though the other Masters do question how he got any information, Anakin just shuts them down because of the bigger threat. He then shares the info with Ahsoka on how to stop the worms, and she begins to break the coolant system to make the atmosphere significantly colder. After all, the worms' native planet is literally a desert, so they wouldn't be adapted for a much colder climate. Fisto's ships try to lock the ship in place, and no clones are ordered to enter until the place is no longer a threat. Ahsoka then goes to hide on the bridge and send out another message, but Barriss slipped through, and the two have a fight in a now much more cramped and freezing space. Barriss tells Ahsoka to kill her, but Ahsoka instead kills the worm when it's vulnerable. The two are then rescued before they freeze to death and are placed in the medical bay, with Anakin comforting his Padawan on her awakening. Ahsoka tells Anakin about her inability to kill Barriss and share her worries if saving her was actually the right call, but Anakin comforts her yet again by explaining things logically as well as not condemning her for going against the Jedi way and staying loyal to her attachments. And with that, we end the two-part zombie feature. I was not ready for the second episode when I was watching it, I can tell you that much. Thankfully, it seemed to get less scary as it went on, but it was still a tribulation for me. So, believe it or not, I don't think there was anything bad with this episode. The pacing felt good, no rushing through events or like taking too long. The dialogue and ways characters bounced off one another was also handled really well, and it all looked good despite the much blander setting of a medical ship, a Star Destroyer, and a medical outpost. This episode does a good job expanding the threat of the brainworms as we see how it adapts without a leader like the Queen, and what it can do with something living rather than just a corpse. Plus, its weakness is also very plausible given the native environment that it's probably never left once. The direction also makes them incredibly creepy still, especially when they force the egg on the one clone in the cargo area, but also at the moment they get taken over, forcing the body to contort as it gets accustomed to its new host. The last thing to go over is the characterization. Although the clones get infected rather quickly, they still get to shine in a way. We, the audience, are reminded that although they were made for the Clone Wars, they aren't just soldiers, but also aides and helpers to the Republic in smaller ways that help the overall war effort. But I like to think that is also their greatest weakness. Despite all the personality many clones get, the worm is easily able to puppet them because their brains were designed for following orders, and their tactical brains also prove a great weapon against the Jedi. Because of this, it also helps to reinforce the terrible future that would be Order 66, where all but Rex follow the order to kill the Jedi with no hesitance. In the end of the day, they were made for following orders, and the worms just took advantage of that. I also had like 2 long paragraphs about the Jedi's characterizations and how the Masters differ from the Padawans and Anakin, but it felt way too long and annoying, and like I'm trying to be smart, and so instead I'll put it as bluntly as I can. The Masters, aside from Anakin, showed the patience that the Jedi espouse even when danger is accumulating. The Padawans, on the other hand, don't have as much experience, and also don't fully know what it is to be a Jedi, only what they are told by the other Masters. As a result, they are more likely to cause mistakes or have different interpretations, such like how Barriss saw protecting as many lives from the brainworms as needing to kill the clone and herself, while Ahsoka wanted to keep Barriss alive because her life is just as important to protect, even if it's being puppeted against her in the immediate. It was definitely a lot longer of an examination, but I just don't have the will to put you all through it. So, I'll get to the ranking. As said, there isn't really any faults in this episode. And in spite of my fears, I'm going to give this a full 10 out of 10. And as a 2-part story within Star Wars canon, I give it a 9 out of 10. It doesn't feel like it breaks the canon and is a genuinely nice addition, but the Geonosian and Queen stuff is kinda strange, especially with her ability to speak the same language as the Republic. Thanks for watching though, and I hope you all have a happy Halloween.